Hello, 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 everyone. Welcome to the Wealthy Trustee webinar. I am your host, Christina Yvette with 7 Ways to Wealth. It's super nice to see everyone. How is everyone doing this evening? How are you guys? You guys can come off mute. You can come on camera if you're able to. You can let me know where you're tuning in from. I see thumbs up. Awesome. Awesome, awesome. I see some people driving. Okay. Awesome, awesome. So let's begin. Well, if you guys are wanting to know the steps that you need to take in order to set up a trust, if you guys are wanting to know how to build wealth the right way, if you're wanting to know how to maximize and acquire assets and how to reduce your tax liability, you have come to the right place. So tonight I'm going to be touching on all of those things. So we have a quick 90-minute presentation, and then after that I will open up the floor for Q&A so that I can answer any and all questions that you guys might have. So overall, what we're going to be going over is asset protection, right? How to actually protect the assets that you have now and the assets that you're going to acquire in the future, okay? Now, the way that I got into this space, I have been a trustee for 11 years. So I became a trustee in 2015. And the way that I became a trustee was through real estate. So I end up setting up a real estate investment firm in 2015. And the way that that came about is because I was a registered nurse. And when I was a registered nurse, I was living paycheck to paycheck and I was working 12-hour shifts, 5, 6 days a week in the hospital. And at that time, my son was 1 years old and I was so frustrated that I wasn't raising him, right? If you're working 6, 12-hour shifts, you're not raising your children. So my son was spending majority of the time with my mom, and I was spending majority of my time with my coworkers and my patients. So that frustration grew and grew and grew. And I told myself, I said, okay, I have to be able to make money outside of the hospital. I cannot depend on this paycheck. I have to be able to have a second stream of income. So one day I was driving to work and this guy named Than Merrill, he was on this show called Flip This House. He's like, do you want to learn how to flip houses? And so I'm driving and I'm like, yeah, I want to learn how to flip houses. And so he's like, okay, come to my 3-day seminar this weekend. So I go to the 3-day seminar and I learned so much about real estate investing. I learned so much about flipping houses that I decided to just dive right in. So 6 months after that seminar, I end up creating my real estate investment firm, which was an LLC, and I end up buying my first property. So when I bought my first property, my hard money lender, he became my mentor. And he lent me 100% of the money. So I didn't have to put any of my own money into that project. But one thing that he told me was, Christina, you need to put that house into a trust. And at that time, I was 25 years old and I didn't know what a trust was. And I'm like, what is a trust and why do I need to put it into a trust? So he began to tell me about what a trust is and about protecting my assets and how, because I'm in real estate now and I have this asset, that somebody could take it from me. And like this property was being renovated, right? So I had subcontractors in and out. Anyone who kind of got injured, they could have slept in, slip and fall. They could have anything. There could have been any type of accident. And so I did not want for someone to be able to take this property away from me, and it's my first property. So immediately I transferred that property from the LLC into a trust. And I have been operating trusts ever since. So that was the first of many trusts. And I have been operating as a trustee ever since. And now that was 11 years ago, and I have been able to now assist other people, thousands of people, in setting up their trust and protecting their assets. So what I want to do is I want to teach you guys what a trust is, right? Because a lot of people, they hear the term trust, they hear the term trust fund and they don't know what it is, right? And so I'm here to teach you and let you know that a trust is an entity, okay? So we're going to dive right into the slides. I have a couple of slides for you guys. And then after that, after we go through the presentation, then I'll answer any and all questions, okay? So let me share my screen here. All right. So what is a trust, right? So a trust is an entity. It is a living, breathing entity just like you. So you are a living, breathing entity as well. A lot of us we don't think that we are entities, but we are. So out here in society, we operate as an entity. So we operate with our name and our social security. So the trust out here in society also operates as an entity. It operates with its name and its 9-digit number. That 9-digit number is an employer identification number that's issued through the IRS, okay? So think about it that way now. So now that you know it's an entity, a trust can do anything and everything that a natural person can do. So if you can buy a house, a trust can buy a house. If you can buy a car, a trust can buy a car. If you can write a book, a trust can write a book. So there's no limitation to what a trust can and cannot do, okay? So now how does this entity come into existence? Well, it comes into existence by way of a contract. So you have to establish a contract in order for you to establish the entity, okay? So it is what we call a contractual entity, okay? So now this contract is between several different parties. Those parties are the grantor, the trustee, and then you have beneficiaries. So we'll talk about the parties in just a moment. But when we're speaking about the contract, there's two parts to the contract that I need you to know. There's several different parts, but the two that I want to explain to you now is the indenture, which is the actual agreement, where you have your bylaws. Those are the terms and conditions of how you want the trust to operate. And then the other part to that is the declaration. So the declaration is where you're declaring what you're setting up in this contract because there's thousands of different contracts, right? This is not a joint venture. This is not a partnership. This is a trust, right? And so you have to declare what it is, and then you have to also declare what it is not, okay? So now that we know that it is a contractual entity, let's talk about the different parties involved in the contract, okay? So the first party that I want you to be aware of is the grantor. Now, the grantor is the creator of the trust. When you start to do your due diligence and research about trust, you'll also see other terms that also mean creator. So you might see the word trustor. You might see the word settler. So all of that means is creator. Okay, so grantor, trustor, settler. Okay, and so what we're saying here is that one party is going to be known as the person who has established or created the trust with the trustee. Okay. Now, this party usually is going to be the first donor. So that means that they're going to place the first asset into the trust. Whatever has what we call intrinsic value. So something that has value, they're going to place it into the trust. Okay. And that's what's going to, what's going to solidify that contract. Now, the second party is the trustee. That is the fiduciary of the trust. Okay. So the trustee is going to control the trust and the assets, and the trustee is going to be the one that's operating the trust on a day-to-day basis. Okay. Now, what they are going to be doing is they are going to be managing the assets that's inside of the trust for the benefit of the beneficiaries. Okay. So the beneficiaries are the inheritors of the trust. Those are the individuals that are going to receive the assets that are inside of the trust once the trust is expired or once the trustee terminates the trust, okay? Those assets would then go to the beneficiaries. But in the meantime, while the trust is still in existence, the beneficiaries are going to be receiving gifts and distributions from the trust, okay? So now that we understand the different parties, let's go ahead and talk about some different types of trust. Now, what I want is that there are hundreds of different types of trust. You need to do your research and due diligence to figure out the best type of trust for you and your family, okay? But I will tell you several different categories that every single trust falls under. So the first category that I'm going to tell you about is express versus implied. So an express trust is a written trust. So it is in black and white, it's on paper, and it's in that contract style, okay? So you can physically see it and touch it, it's tangible, you're going to physically sign it. Versus an implied trust. An implied trust is where you have that verbal agreement and it stays verbal, it stays oral. There's no it's not in black and white, it's not in writing, okay? So it's just the way that it is, it's implied, okay? Now, the next category that I want to give you is simple versus complex. A simple trust is where the trustee has to be able to distribute all of the money that's inside of the trust. And with a simple trust, it's shorter in nature and it has less terms and conditions, or what we call bylaws. Versus a complex trust is going to be longer in nature, so there's more provisions inside of that trust. And with that trust, the trustee is able to deem that it's necessary to hold trust funds. So it's not necessary for the trustee to distribute all the money that's inside of the trust, okay? Now, the next category that I want to give you guys is statutory versus non-statutory. So with a statutory trust, every single trust has, and every single state has their own laws, right? And so these are called state statutes and codes. Now, with a statutory trust, that means that those state statutes and codes are embedded inside of the contract, which means that that type of trust is limited to where it can only be operated in that one state because of the state statutes and codes, okay? And that means that it is also having to be registered with that state and available on the public records for people to be able to search for that statutory trust versus a non-statutory trust. So a non-statutory trust is where there are no state statutes and codes. So that means that it's not restricted to only being utilized in that one state. And it doesn't have to be registered in the public records. So no one has to know of the existence. So it gets to remain private. So with a non-statutory trust, you can actually operate it in the entire United States plus all of the US territories. Now, the next category that I want to give you guys is discretionary versus non-discretionary. So with the discretionary trust, that means that the trustee has full discretion to be able to make decisions for the trust that's not embedded inside of the contract, right? So an example is, for example, let's just say that the trustee says, hey, it's time to buy Bitcoin, right? But nowhere in the contract does it say that the trustee can buy Bitcoin. Because the trust is discretionary, the trustee is able to do that. Versus a non-discretionary trust means that the trustee cannot make any decisions that are not spelled out inside of those bylaws. Okay. And the last category that I want to give you guys is revocable versus irrevocable. So when we're talking about revocability, we are only referring to one party. The one party that we're referring to is the grantor. So with the revocable trust, what we're saying is that the grantor has revocability to be able to revoke the trust. They can make changes to the trust. They can remove trustees and beneficiaries. They can remove assets to the trust, and they can terminate the trust. So because they have so much power and control, usually the grantor is also going to serve as the trustee and the beneficiary. So that means that the grantor is going to be all three, okay? And because the grantor is all three, this type of trust is seen as their alter ego. So it's not seen as an extension as them, it's seen as them, okay? So usually with that type of trust is going to operate under the grantor social security number, okay? Now with a revocable trust, unfortunately, it does not protect their assets. So if creditors are coming after that individual, they can come after the trust, right? And so they're able to sue the trust. And if the trust was to end up in some form of litigation, then the judge can decide to pierce through that trust. And if the judge pierces through that trust, then the grantor is forced to produce the trust in court. And now everyone is able to see the assets, the net worth, how much cash you have in the trust, who the beneficiaries are. So it puts that trust at risk, and that trust is no longer private. And so you definitely want to maintain privacy. So on the contrary to that, you have an irrevocable trust. An irrevocable trust is where the grantor has irrevocability. So that means that they have no power and no control. So they are not operating the trust. So that means that they cannot remove the trustees and beneficiaries. They cannot terminate the trust. They cannot make any changes to the trust at all. And if they were to place assets into the trust, they cannot take back those assets. So because of the nature of that contract being irrevocable, the grantor cannot be the trustee and the grantor cannot be the beneficiary. So the grantor is the only person who has irrevocability. Now, with an irrevocable trust, your assets are fully protected because if any creditors are coming after that type of trust, they cannot pierce through that trust. And if that trust was to end up in court, the judge would decide not to pierce through that trust, which means that the privacy of the beneficiaries and their identity gets to remain intact. The trust, the net worth, the cash, the assets, all of those things get to remain intact and private, which is ultimately what you want, right? Because overall, why you would be creating a trust would be for privacy purposes, okay? Now, let's talk about the steps that you need to take in order to actually create a trust, okay? So the first thing is that you need to determine the type of trust that you're going to create. Now, I gave you several different categories, okay? So I just gave you 5 categories. Now, if you are intentional about protecting your assets and you want your assets to be fully protected, then this is the type of trust that I recommend, okay? So I recommend out of those 5 categories, I recommend that the trust is express in nature, that the trust is complex in nature, that the trust is non-statutory, that the trust is discretionary, and that the trust is irrevocable. So it should fall under those 5 categories for it to be truly bulletproof and for it to hold up in court and for it to protect your assets 100%, okay? So next is after you have determined the type of trust that you want to create, now you're going to move on to step 2, which is you're going to name the trust. Okay, so now it's time for us to establish this trust. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a name. Now, what I need you to know is do not make the biggest mistake that everyone else makes. Everyone always names the trust after themselves. So if my name is John Doe, I go and create the John Doe Trust. That's the biggest mistake ever because you don't want anyone to know that you're associated with the trust, okay? You want there to be a degree of separation or what we call obscurity, okay? So you're not going to name the trust after yourself. You're going to choose unique names. Like, for example, my favorite flower is a sunflower. So I'm going to call my trust the Sunflower Legacy, right? And so no one knows that Christina is associated with the Sunflower Legacy, right? And now I'm able to operate the Sunflower Legacy, but it's going to be private, right? And so that's one thing that you want to be aware of. Do not make that mistake. The second thing that I need you to know is that you don't have to have the word trust in the actual name, okay? So a lot of people, they think that they have that it has to end in trust, just like an LLC or just like a corporation, but trust don't operate that way. Okay, so it doesn't have to have the word trust. So you see the name that I just gave you an example, the Sunflower Legacy. It doesn't say the Sunflower Legacy Trust, right? So now you don't want to voluntarily let society know that the entity that you're operating is a trust. Okay, so let there be, you know, some form of suspense there. Okay, so now that you have decided what you're going to name your trust, you have to appoint the different parties. Okay, so you have a grantor that you need to appoint, a trustee, a beneficiary, and a successor. Okay, so if you're creating a revocable trust, then you can serve as the grantor, trustee, and beneficiary. If you're creating an irrevocable trust, which is that bulletproof trust, you have to choose someone else to be the grantor because you cannot be the grantor and the trustee and the beneficiary, okay? So you're gonna have to have different parties involved in your trust, okay? Now, the grantor has no power and no control. I don't think you want that position. The trustee has all the power and all the control. I think that's the position that you want, okay? Now, when it comes to the beneficiaries, that's where we're gonna place our children, okay? So that's gonna be our next of kin, our spouse, or our children, or whoever we want to inherit our assets, okay? And then the last position that you might want to think about is a successor trustee. You have to have a succession plan in place. So your successor trustee is going to be the individual that's going to take over after you if you're serving as the trustee, okay? So they're going to take over after you in the event that something happens to you. Meaning, if you become incapacitated, if you decide, hey, I'm too old and I want to resign, Or if you transition, then the trust needs to continue to operate, which means that your successor trustee is going to pick up where you left off and they're going to continue to operate the trust. Okay, so it's so important that you appoint someone in that position. That person needs to be appointed as soon as possible, and they need to be 18 years of age or older and ready to take over as early as today. Okay, so let's move on to number three. So in number three, we're going to actually create the agreement. Okay. Remember, the word indenture means agreement. So we're creating this contract. In this contract, we're going to put all the terms and conditions of how we want the trust to be ran, right? And so who's running the trust? The trustee. Okay, the trustee's operating the trust based off of what we've placed inside of the bylaws, which we call provisions. Okay, now one of the provisions that we put in place are spendthrift provisions. Those are vitally important because you have spendthrifts that are going to be a part of your organization that they just want to dissipate the wealth. Those spendthrifts are your beneficiaries. Those spendthrifts are your children. I guarantee you that your children, they're going to want to blow the dough, right? They're going to want to waste all the money that's inside of the trust. So you have to put restrictions in place of what they have to do in order to qualify to receive those trust funds. Okay. So for example, one restriction that we will put in place is an education restriction. So we say, hey, you have to have a bachelor's degree, or you have to have, take a budgeting and financing class, or you have to have, or you have to become, a doctor. Whatever it is that you want, you can put it in there. Another one is an age restriction, right? So we can say, in order for you to receive trust funds, you have to be 23 years old, right? Instead of 18 or 16 or 12, things like that, right? Because if a beneficiary is receiving, let's just say $10,000 a month, right? A 12-year-old probably doesn't need $10,000 a month, but maybe a 33-year-old does, right? And so that's why you want to put age restrictions in place. And you also want to put a distribution restriction, and you want to put yourself in a position to where you're controlling the money from the grave. So if you put a distribution restriction in place, then what you're saying is that, hey, you can only spend the money on real estate, or you can only spend the money on index funds or an insurance policy, or education or your lifestyle, right? And you can also put restrictions and say you can't spend it on illicit drugs. You can't buy alcohol with it. You can't buy tobacco with it. You can't go gambling or playing the lottery every single week, right? So you can put those restrictions in place in order for them to qualify to receive trust funds. At the end of the day, you have to understand that you're the one that established this foundation. You're the one that established this legacy. And so you have to protect the legacy. You have to preserve the legacy, and you have to conserve the legacy. And this is what it takes. It takes for you to put the right provisions in place in order for that generational wealth to actually reach the second and third and fourth and fifth generation. Okay. So let's move on to step four. So in step four, we're going to be legalizing the trust. And so that means that we're going to get it notarized by a notary public. Okay. And so it's going to require two signatures. It's going to require the grantor signature and the first trustee signature. Those signatures need to be witnessed by a notary public. Once that notary public witnesses those signatures, he or she is going to place their seal on the contract, and then the contract is going to be legalized and you can now operate it. So the first thing that you want to do once the contract is legalized and you can operate it is you want to go ahead and open up that trust fund. Okay. So when you hear the term trust fund, we're actually referring to the bank account where trust funds are held. Okay. So now when you are opening up this bank account, right, you can choose any financial institution of your choice. You can choose a bank, a credit union, or a brokerage. The types of accounts that you can choose are checking account, savings account, money market accounts, brokerage accounts, and cash management accounts, okay? Now, every single bank is going to have their minimum. Some banks are $100, some banks are $1,000. It just depends on the financial institution. Now, what you're going to bring with you is obviously proof of ID, but then you're also going to bring two pieces of documentation for the trust. You're going to bring the certificate of trust, which is proof of identity that the trust exists. So just like how you walk around with a driver's license, the trust also needs to walk around with ID. So on that certificate of trust, it pretty much shows everything. It has the EIN number, it has the name, it has the establishment date for the trust, the address of the trust, things of that nature, okay? Who the grantor is, who the trustee is. So that's vitally important. You need to bring that with you along with the EIN number. So the EIN number is the employer identification number, which is the 9-digit number that is issued by the IRS, okay? It's very, very, very unlikely that you will be able to open up a trust fund bank account for the trust without an employer identification number, okay? So you'll bring those two pieces of information with you, and then you'll be able to open up the trust account, and then you'll be able to fund the trust account. So you can fund it with the minimum, you can fund it with whatever amount that you want to lend the trust in order for the trust fund account to be established, okay? So once the trust fund is established and you have funded it with whatever the minimum is, now it's time to actually transfer assets into the trust. This is the biggest mistake that I see people make. They actually skip this entire part, right? So now, within the trust indenture, you have a section and it is the schedules. There's several different schedules. One of them is a Schedule B. In that Schedule B, that's where you're going to list the assets. Let's just say that you have a piece of property, right? You have a primary residence. You have that beautiful house, right? That beautiful house with a white picket fence, right? And so this house that you bought is in your personal name, right? This is your primary residence, where you live, where your spouse live, where your children sleep at night, okay? And so usually our largest investment and our most expensive, bill is our mortgage, is our house, right? So when you are transferring property into the trust, right, the first thing that you're going to do is you're going to list it in the schedule, right? So you're going to go ahead and list that property, but then this is where people make mistakes, right? Not only are you just going to list the property into the trust, you have to legally convey that property, right, from your personal name into the name of the trust, which means that when you bought that property, in order for you to be known as the owner of that property, they gave you a deed. So now you have to re-deed that property from your personal name into the trust, okay? So that's going to take you preparing a new deed, and then you going down to the county and you actually getting it recorded. And then after that, they're going to update the public records. So I don't know if you know this, but you owning that property, that information is available on the public records. Anyone and everyone can go down to your county website. So whatever county, let's just say you live in Jefferson County, right? They can go to Jefferson County's website. They can do a property search. They can put your first and last name, and every single house that you own in that county is going to show up, right? And so now you want to remove yourself from the county records. You want to remove yourself from the public records. And so now that you have deeded that property over into the trust, now the county recorder's office is going to update the public records to show that the new owner of that property is the trust and not you. So that is what is going to put you in a position to where your name is private, it's off of the public records. People are not going to know that that is your property, right? Because now that property belongs to the trust and you control it, okay? So let's move on to the next section. So let's talk about asset protection, because the number one reason why you want to set up a trust, one is for privacy. You don't want anyone to know that you're associated with these assets. But the next thing is for asset protection. You want to protect those assets. You want to protect them from things like bankruptcy, divorce, foreclosure, heavy taxation, lawsuits, and even probate. right? And so let's dive into a few of them. The first one I want to tell you is about divorce, right? So when it comes to a divorce is a lawsuit between two spouses, right? And unfortunately, with a divorce, sometimes one spouse will end up with everything or nothing, and the other spouse will end up with nothing, right? So if that's the case, right? When it comes to a divorce, everything that's in your personal name is what's included in the court proceedings, okay? So what we mean is all of your assets, all of your liabilities. So if you, any houses, any cars, any jewelry, right? Your 401k, things like that, plus your liabilities like your student loans, credit cards, personal loans, things like that, right? Now, the beautiful thing about a trust is that you are not the trust is not you. So if you're going through a divorce, right, they cannot pull the trust into the divorce. So if you have a trust, and let's just say you have two properties and $100,000 in that trust, right? Every asset that's in that trust is protected, and they cannot pull it into your divorce because the trust is not the one getting divorced, you are, right? And so that's how you can protect assets from that type of situation. Let's talk about heavy taxes, right? Because a lot of us, we're giving away 50% or more of our taxes, especially if we're in New York and California, right? And so the way that a trust can help you is the IRS will allow you to donate up to 60% of your annual gross income to a particular type of trust, right? And so let's just say you make $100,000 for the year and the IRS lets you allocate 60,000 of it to your trust, and that means that you're only going to be taxed on 40,000, right? Out of 100,000, which is extremely beneficial for you because that means you get to save thousands of dollars on taxes. And now that money can be allocated somewhere else, right? It can be allocated to you buying, property or assets or investments or businesses, okay? So the next one is lawsuits, right? So a lot of people, right? You have to understand that we live in a very sue-friendly country, right? We live in America and everyone wants to sue you, right? Your sibling wants to sue you, your neighbor wants to sue you, your coworker wants to sue you, your employer wants to sue you, your employee wants to sue you, your clients and customers, your tenants, everyone, they want to sue you. Trust me. You do not want to wait until you're getting sued in order to protect yourself from a lawsuit. Okay, that's the biggest mistake that people make. People are literally walking around here thinking that they're not going to get sued. And then it happens overnight. And then they are living in regret, thinking, oh, I should have protected myself, right? So now is the best time to protect yourself, okay? So let's just say that you are a business owner, right? And you are operating an LLC. Let me ask you guys this question. What does LLC stand for?
Limited
Limited
liability company.
company.
You guys are right. It stands for limited liability company. Okay. So if you hear it, right, limited liability company, right? So if the company has limited liability, who do you think has the other half of that liability?
You do.
Yes, exactly. Exact. Thank you for saying that. So yes, you do. So let me ask you this for my business owners and entrepreneurs that's on the call. Who owns your LLC or your corporation? Who's the owner on paper?
For now, me, but I need to move it to the trust.
Okay, all right. So she said for now me. And that is how pretty much all of us was instructed, including myself. Thank God that my LLC was only in that type of situation for 6 months before my mentor told me otherwise, right? So what you need to realize is that if you are the owner of your LLC on paper, you are liable, right? So that means that if anything happens, so let's just say that you have a client that wants to sue you, right? Let's just say you run in a candle company, right? Because I love candles. I was burning 2 and 3 candles today, okay? So I love candles. So let's just say you have a candle company and the a client is now accusing you, saying that your candle made her house burn down, right? So now it's so easy for them to find you, right? All they have to do is do a search on the Secretary of State's website, right? So do you know that that's a part of the public records? All they do is go to the Secretary of State website, they do a business search, they put in the name of your business, and boom, all of the information comes up, right? Including the owner's name, which is your name. So now they know who you are, where to find you, the address, everything, okay? So now they know who to serve, and now they're going to create a lawsuit. They're going to go after you after the LLC, right? So now you have this whole litigation thing going on, right? And what is happening now is the judge is saying, okay, yeah, you know what? Your candle made her house burn down. Her house is worth $500,000. Here's a judgment, $500,000. So now out of nowhere, your LLC has a judgment for $500,000. So now they're going to go after the LLC for the 500,000. But let's just say that the LLC doesn't have 500,000. So then what's going to happen? What do you
They're
guys
gonna come
think?
for you. They're gonna come for you, your house, your kids. Just kidding.
The dog, everything. See,
Everybody.
she's everybody, hide your kids. So she is so right. So what's going to happen is the judge can decide to pierce through the corporate veil. So the corporate veil is that itty bitty little bit of tiny, tiny, tiny protection that you thought you had with the LLC, right? So you hear it in the word limited liability. It's limited. It don't say nothing about full liability. You did not hear that, right? So that little itty bitty piece of protection that you thought you had, the judge decided, bump, let's pierce right through it. So the judge pierces right through it, goes after the authorized member, which is you. Now that means that they're going after you personally for the $500,000. So what can they do? They can actually seize your bank accounts, right? So they can garnish everything that you have. They can garnish your wages if you have wages, right, associated with your Social Security. So if you have a W-2 here, if you got a 1099 here, right, they can garnish every single bank account that has your name, even the joint ones, right? And then they can seize every single asset that they need to seize in order to cover that judgment. That means the house, the car, the paintings, the watch, the handbags, everything, right? And so then that was what's going to happen. And you don't want to be in that situation. You don't want to be liable for your LLC. So what you need to do is you need to immediately, like yesterday, remove yourself as the authorized member from your LLC. You need to put the trust as the new authorized member of your LLC, because in this same situation, what's going to happen is if they decide to go after your LLC, then they're going to, and if they pierce through the corporate veil, they're going to go after your trust. Your trust is going to be acting as a holding company. It's there to hold that asset. Your LLC is an asset. So your trust is the holding company, okay? So it's non-operational. It doesn't have employees. It doesn't offer products and services, okay? And it's there to just hold the asset. Now, so now that's what's going to happen, and that trust is going to protect you, and that trust is going to take full liability for that LLC, okay? Which is what you want, because your name is nowhere in sight, right? So they're not going to come after you personally. So if you are operating your LLC and if you're the owner, then it's time to get restructured and do things the right way, okay? So I quickly want to just show you guys a video. Hold on for me 1 second. Let me get back to my page here. Hold on 1 second. All right, so let me just show you what this looks like.
Just a quick story of why I'm here. I was sued. I lost. Just a quick story of why I'm here. I was sued. I lost everything. And when I say everything, I'm talking about a $700,000 house. I'm talking about 4 vehicles. I'm talking about my bank account. I'm talking about my life savings. I believed in having 6 months of expenses put up, saved up just in case anything happened, lost a career and stuff like that. All of that was gone. And there was no protection for me. Then I had my third bout with cancer. I haven't had any income since 2020, since COVID. As I told you, I think yesterday, I've been looking for a way to protect myself because I have children that are going to depend on me. So I would encourage anyone that would listen to anything that has been taught and said by you, please, 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 if you work hard to gain assets, do whatever you can do to protect your assets. Why do you think they've hid this from us for so long? Why do you think they were the only ones that were saying trust fund babies? It was because they were the only ones who were privileged to know this, who was privy to this knowledge. Now we have it through Christina. And I thank you for your level of knowledge and for not being a gatekeeper and for giving us what we need to know in order to make this happen. So please, 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 if you endeavor to get anything in this world and to keep anything in this world, please, please, please protect it. Get your trusts. And I have no reason other than my knowledge and what I've been through. But the only reason I'm here is because I've been through it. So I would encourage anyone.
So that's why it's so important. So please do not wait until you're getting sued to protect yourself from a lawsuit, okay? So now let's talk about the next thing. So hold on, let me get back to my slides here. So the next one that I want to discuss is, I have another question for you guys, okay? So that house that you live in that we're talking about, right? That you need to protect, right? That house that you live in, let me ask you, if you didn't wake up tomorrow, how do you expect that house that's in your personal name to be transferred to your son's name or to your daughter's name or to your spouse's name or whoever you want to have the property? So that's a legitimate question that I want some of you guys to come off mute. Let me know what the answer is. How do you expect that transfer to happen if that house is in your personal name?
It's not going to happen. It's going to be a lot of headache, a lot of probate, a lot of drama, and a lot of money.
Yes. Yes, yes, yes. You are so right. Thank you so much. So she is absolutely right, right? Because at the end of the day, if that house is in your personal name, who's able to sign on your behalf? You don't exist anymore. You transitioned. You didn't wake up, right? And so a lot of us, we have bought into the lie. And so the lie that we bought into is that our children automatically is going to receive my house, right? My son is automatically going to get my house. He's the only child, right? My daughter's going to automatically get my house. And I'm here to tell you that your children are losing their inheritance. They're losing their inheritance because we are not doing the things that we need to be doing, okay? So we do not have our affairs in order, which means that we're leaving it up to chance, right? And so what's going to end up happening is that we're going to leave it up to a judge. And that judge is going to be able to decide if our son gets our house, if our daughter gets our house. That judge doesn't know your son. That judge doesn't know your daughter. That judge doesn't know you. So why would you leave it up to a judge to make that decision when you have the power to make that decision now by getting your affairs in order now? Right? And so you want to avoid what we call the probate process. She just mentioned it. Thank you, KJ. She just mentioned it, right? That we would have to go to probate. That's the whole court procedures that has to happen when you leave assets and you don't have a succession plan for those assets, right? And so it's important for us to be able to have this succession plan in place, right? So what needs to happen is the following, right? So when it comes to this primary residence, let's just say that you have a house, you have a car, and you have, $200,000 in the bank, right? In a personal checking account, right? And so you didn't wake up tomorrow. Now what's going to happen? Right? And so what's going to happen is because you did not have your affairs in order, because you did not create an estate while you were living, because you were irresponsible, the state where you're resident, they now have to take responsibility, right? They now have to create a living estate for you, right? They now have to go ahead and transfer your assets into an estate. So they're going to create an estate. Guess what they're going to call the estate? Your first and last name, right? The John Doe estate. They're going to transfer your house, your car, and the $200,000 that you have in the bank. They're going to transfer into the estate. Now, the first thing that happens is the estate goes into probate. Okay, so that's family court goes into probate. Okay, so now the estate is in probate. So the estate needs to be represented by a probate attorney, right? Ends up in probate court. The first thing that the judge does is the judge is going to cover your liabilities, pay off your liabilities. So what, like, do you know what kind of liabilities you left at the end of life?
Hmm.
I guarantee you, you don't know, right? But I will tell you, student loans, they come out of the woodworks, right? Credit card bills pile up, right? They want past due this, past due that. Sometimes your house might get foreclosed on, right? Or you have mortgage note, you have a personal loan, right? But one that you didn't even think about, that nobody thinks about, is the medical bills.
Medical bills.
Exactly. Yes, Miss KJ. It's the medical bills, right? Do you know, are you aware that you were sitting in the ICU for a week and that you racked up $170,000 in medical bills? Do you know that? Do you know that you was in a nursing home for a year and a half on a ventilator? Do you know that you was in rehab for weeks on end? No, we don't know that. We don't know what kind of medical bills that we're going to end up. A lot of people say, oh, well, I have insurance. No, it doesn't work that way. Oh, Medicare and Medicaid. No, they want to be reimbursed. When I tell you that they turn into a creditor quicker than anything, they want to be reimbursed. Medicare, Medicaid, they want to be reimbursed. So they're going to go after your estate. Okay. And guess what? If you're a resident of Texas, the state of Texas is going to just hand them the check, right? So that's what the judge is going to do, right? And so now that $200,000 that you had sitting in your checking account, right? That's now inside of your estate. That's going to the credit cards, the hospital bills, right? The student loans, right? And if there's not enough money to cover those liabilities, what do you think the judge is going to do? Come off mute, let me know. The judge is going to start to liquidate your assets. The judge is going to decide to sell your house. The house that you thought that was going to go to your son and your daughter. The house that you thought that was going to stay in your family for generations. The house that you thought that your son was going to raise your grandchildren in. And now you have your children, right? So let's now bring your children into the mix because you thought that your children were going to receive their inheritance. You thought that they were going to get your house. But in all actuality, now you have them fighting in court. So one, we see that they fight each other, right? The siblings, they start to fight. The second thing is that the siblings are now fighting the court system. They're fighting to keep mom's house. They're fighting to keep dad's house. And unfortunately, the judge, how many times have you seen it? To where people's homes are being auctioned off on the county steps. How many times have we seen it? How many times? Go on Zillow right now. You see probate, 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 probate. All these houses that are for sale, that they've been for sale for 365 days on probate. You see it. Why? Because people did not have their affairs in order, right? And so that's what's going to end up happening. So now if the judge decides to sell your house to reimburse Medicaid and Medicare, whatever is left over is what your children get. Your children, they get the leftovers, whatever is left over. which is so sad because that is not what you wanted for them. You wanted for them to have your house, for them to have your car, for them to have the entire $200,000, right? Not the peanuts and the crumbs, right? That the court system left over, because it's not only the medical bills and the liabilities, right? So what ends up happening? What ends up eating away from your living estate is the court fees, the attorney fees, and then all of the bills and the creditors, everything that you had to pay back, right? So this whole entire situation can look very different. Did you know that we're all going to go through probate? Probate is inevitable unless there's only one way to avoid probate, unless you set up a trust. That trust is your estate. That trust is the only way for you to protect those assets and avoid probate. There's no other way to avoid probate. There's no other way. If you have an LLC, you're going straight to probate. A corporation, you're going straight to probate. A trust, it gets to avoid probate. So now let me tell you what this picture looks like if you decide that you wanted to get your affairs in order. So let's just say that you said, yeah, I want to get my affairs in order. I want to set up my trust. I want to transfer my assets. So you set up your trust, right? The Sunflower Estate, right? And then you transferred the house, the car, and the $200,000 into the trust fund account, right? You did not wake up tomorrow. Guess what? You assigned a successor trustee. That successor trustee is going to pick up where you left off. They're going to continue to operate the trust, right? And your family gets to avoid probate. You don't go to probate at all. Why? Because all of the assets are inside of the trust. The trust still exists, right? So this trust, it could exist for 100 years, right? Let's just say you set it up for 100 years. So now it's going to exist for 100 years. Last time I checked, you're the one that didn't wake up tomorrow. The trust is still living. This trust is still breathing. The trust is still in full operation. The trust is designed to outlive you. So the trust is going to continue. The successor trustee is going to pick up where you left off, continue to operate the trust, right? The house is going to remain intact, owned by the trust. Your children are going to get to grieve in peace because they just lost the most important person of their life. And thank God that you decided to think about them and not drag them through the courts while they're grieving. So they get to grieve in peace now. And they get to receive trust funds. They get to receive distributions and gifts. Why? Because the trust has money. The trust has assets that's generating cash flow. And the trust has a trustee, which was the successor, that's managing and maintaining, right? And the best part about this is that all that debt that you had at the end of life, that debt dies with you. Those creditors cannot come after your trust estate. So the student loans, discharged. The credit cards, discharged. The medical bills, discharged. They all die with you. They cannot go after your trust, and they can only go after things that are associated with your name and social. Nothing that you put into the trust is associated with your name and social. Everything that's inside of the trust is associated with the trust name and the trust EIN. This is the process that you want to take when you are passing down assets from generation to generation. So you want to avoid the probate process, and this is what a trust can do for you. So let's continue on. All right, so let's go through the wealth building formula, okay? This is how you're going to build wealth with the trust if you are intentional about building generational wealth, okay? So I have three pillars here. I have structure, credit, and invest. So let's talk about structure. So the first thing I want you to know is that if you don't have trust within your structure, you need to get restructured, okay? So I just told you how important a trust is for privacy and protection. Okay, so just think about the two P's. So now the three trusts that I recommend is a business trust, a family trust, and a tax exempt nonprofit trust. Okay, so let's just break down each one of these trusts so that you can understand the importance of it. So remember at the beginning of the call, I told you if you're an entrepreneur or a business owner and you have an LLC or a corporation, you do not want to own that business in your personal name. Why? Because you're liable. So what you want to do is you want to establish a business trust, right? And so this trust can be operated in two ways. It could either be operated as a holding company, which means that it's non-operational and all it's going to do is it's going to hold the LLC or the corporation, or you can establish it like a traditional business. So if you don't have an LLC, but let's just say that you want to do retail or e-com or a restaurant or something like that, then you can establish a business trust and then you can operate your business as a trust and you don't even have to get an LLC or a corporation, okay? But let's just say that you wanted to operate it like a holding company. So what you need to do is you need to go to the Secretary of State website where you establish that articles of organization or corporation. You need to do an amendment. You need to remove yourself as the owner and you need to add the business trust as the new owner. So now that LLC is going to be owned by the business trust. So let's just say that that LLC generates $100,000, right? Well, that LLC is going to do a K-1 distribution and distribute that money to the business trust. So now the business trust just received $100,000 in income, right? And so one thing about the trust that I absolutely love is that you get to spend the money first and then you're going to be taxed on the leftovers, okay? So what we're going to do is we are going to see what the operating expenses are for the trust, the OPEX, okay? So let's just say that it costs about $30,000 to operate the trust. So we're going to write that off. And now out of the 100,000, we wrote off 30, we have 70 that's left. We're going to be taxed on that $70,000. And a trust is taxed anywhere between 10% upwards of 37%. So we don't want to be taxed. So what we're going to do is we're going to distribute that $70,000 to the beneficiary. So what we are going to do is we're going to assign the family trust to be the beneficiary of the business trust. Why? Because we're entrepreneurs and business owners and we need to generate money from the business in order to provide for the family. So that's why the family trust is going to be the beneficiary. So now what's going to happen is that $70,000, right? If we leave it inside of the trust, then we're going to be taxed. If we distribute it to the family trust, then we get to write off the 70,000. So that's what we're going to do. So we're going to distribute the 70,000 to the family trust. So now on the business trust level, out of that 100,000, right, 30,000 went to operating expenses, 70,000 was distributed, which means that there's $0 that's left, which means that there's a 0% tax liability. So we're done with taxes for the business trust. So now let's move on to the private family trust. So now for the private family trust, this is where you do everything personal that has nothing to do with business. So this is where your children are your beneficiaries, and this is where you have expenses like your groceries, your mortgage or your rent, your utilities, insurances, kids' tuition, things like that, right? So let's just say that it costs $60,000, right, in order to run your family, right? Well, remember, you received $70,000 in income, right? That income came from the business trust. And so that $70,000, you have to pay taxes on it, right? The family trust. And so what we need to do is we need to spend the money first, and then we need to be taxed on the leftovers. So what's going to happen is we have operating expenses and it costs us about $60,000 in order to run our family. So out of that $70,000, we're going to write off $60,000 and now we have $10,000 that's left. And remember the tax rate is anywhere between 10% upwards of 37%. So what's going to happen is we can definitely pay $1,000 in taxes, or what we can do is we can donate. We can do what we call a charitable contribution, and we can donate that $10,000 to our tax exempt nonprofit trust. Okay, so you can donate that 10,000 to a charity of your choice, right? And it could also be a charity that you are associated with, okay? So out of the 70,000 that came in, 60,000 went to operating expenses, 10,000 went to a charitable contribution. So that means that there's $0 left, which is a 0% tax liability. So now let's move on to the tax exempt trust. So the tax exempt trust is a trust where it is a nonprofit. It's a traditional nonprofit. It is designated as a 508c1a. So it's just like a 501c3, but instead of you having to apply for a 501c3 tax exempt status, you are exempt because of the separation between church and state. So it's automatically exempt from federal taxes, and it can qualify to be exempt from state taxes, city taxes, from any type of other taxes, right? Property taxes, sales taxes, things of that nature, okay? So now what's going to happen is this type of entity, you can operate it for religious purposes, you can operate it as a charity, you can operate it for education purposes or like a school, okay? So you get to decide. So now what I want you to know of is that the IRS will allow you to donate up to 60% of your annual gross income to this type of trust, okay? The tax exempt nonprofit trust. So once again, if you're making $100,000 annual gross income in your W-2 job, right? The IRS will allow you to donate up to $60,000. And then you get to write it off, right? And now you're only going to be taxed on 40,000 of the 100,000, which means that you're going to be saving thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars on taxes, okay? The money that you're going to be saving on taxes, what can you do with that money? You can allocate it somewhere else, right? Which is extremely powerful, which is what you want to do, okay? So let's move on to the next section, which is credit, right? And so what I need you to know is that the trust is able to build credit just like you, okay? So if you're able to build credit, the trust can build credit too, but it can build credit off of the EIN, the employee identification number, which means that it's going to be building credit, right, off of, it's going to be business credit, just like your LLC, just like your corporation. So that's the type of credit that it is, okay? So with that being said, what you want to do is you want to leverage OPM, other people's money. You want to leverage the bank's money. So that's why you want to be able to establish credit for this type of entity, right? Because now you get to leverage a second credit profile, because a lot of us, we're so focused on our personal credit, but we get lower lines of credit. A business can get higher lines of credit, right? A business can get, 200,000, 300,000 line of credit versus 10 and 15,000. So just consider that, because you want to be able to do what the bank is doing. The bank is leveraging you, right? The bank is using other people's money in order to get rich, right? And so you also need to be doing the same thing, because at the end of the day, where is your money going? Let's talk about it. Where is your money going?
Mortgage, bills, utilities, travel,
Exactly. But yeah,
life.
so when your money is directly deposited into your bank account, right? It's direct deposit. So who you bank with? So the direct deposit goes to who?
To the bank.
Yeah, who do you bank with?
U.S. Bank, Wells
Okay.
Fargo, Navy
Wells Fargo.
Federal.
Exactly, exactly. So now let's just say it goes to Wells Fargo, right? So your check, when you get paid on Friday, your check goes straight to Wells Fargo. And then after Wells Fargo, so that means that Wells Fargo gets paid first, right? And what do you think Wells Fargo is doing with the money?
Investing it.
Exactly. You think that your money is just sitting there. You think that your three, four, five, six, $7,000 is just sitting there. No, it's not. Right? They're lending it out for cars, student loans, credit cards, home loans, all kind of stuff. So they're lending out your money. They're using OPM They're lending out your money and they're charging high interest to all of these other people that are getting the loans. Okay. So that's what's happening with your money. But now, let's just say hypothetically, because we live in a fractional reserve system, right? So the money that you think you have inside of your account is not really inside of your account. Only a fraction of it is, okay? So now it's payday. What's the first thing that you do with your money? So we already know what Wells Fargo did with your money, and they already fractioned it off and sold it out and did all this other stuff. What's the first thing that you do with your money?
Most people give it back to Wells Fargo to pay the mortgage.
Exactly. So the first thing that you do with your money is you pay the mortgage. Can you believe that? You paying the mortgage, you paying your rent, you buying groceries, you putting gas in the car, you paying the utilities, all this stuff. So you mean to tell me that the first thing that you are doing is you're paying everybody else. You paying all these other companies
Accept
instead of
yourself.
accept yourself. Accept yourself. We are not paying ourselves. And so we need to get out of that mindset of paying everybody first, and we need to adapt a new mindset of paying ourselves first, right? And so if we are adopting a new mindset, which it is going to take a mindset shift, and I will tell you that the mindset shift is scary. It is scary, but you have to do it while you're afraid. You have to do it while you're on the fence. You have to do it while you're learning, right? So now what's going to happen is we have to take a new approach, because if we keep doing the same thing that we've always done, we're going to keep getting the same thing that we've always gotten, right? So now we have to adopt a new way of doing things, and we need to park our money in a place where it's going to multiply, it's going to bring back friends, and it's going to pay us first, right? And so that's going to take us to be able to acquire assets and to invest. Right. And so the best place for you to do that is through your index universal life insurance policy. So now let's hop over to the next pillar, right? So these are my two favorite assets. So one is the IUL policy. The next one is real estate. Okay. So when it comes to the life insurance policy, I absolutely love it, because a lot of people, they are so confused when it comes to life insurance, right? A lot of people think that life insurance is supposed to be used when they are dead. But in all actuality, life insurance is supposed to be used when you are living. That's why it's called life insurance and not death insurance. Okay.
Mhm.
It's called life insurance because there are living benefits, right? A lot of living benefits. So with this type of policy, one, your money is protected. Okay, so for example, if you end up in a lawsuit, they cannot just go and force you to take the money out of your life insurance. So the judge can't say, oh, you got $500,000 in your life insurance policy. Come on, take it out. We're seizing it. Nope, they can't touch it. Okay, so your money that's inside of your life insurance policy is protected. The next thing is that the money that's inside of your policy, it gets to grow tax-free, right? So we like tax-free, right? We don't want the IRS just dipping into everything that we have, okay? So you want your money to be able to grow tax-free. The next thing is that it has a death benefit associated. So your life is insured. If anything happens to you, then what's going to happen is they're going to pay out your beneficiary, okay? And then there's another account in there called cash value. So cash value is where you are going to be accumulating cash inside of your account based off of your premiums, right? And so whenever you're paying your premiums every single month, so let's just say that you set up your policy to where you're paying $100 a month, right? Well, if you set it up, if you structure it this way to where you're paying $100 and $20 is going to the carrier, and that's the cost of insurance, the other $80 is going to your cash value. And so now your cash value is starting to accumulate cash, right? And so not only are you accumulating the cash, right? Because I'm paying my premium every single month, $100, $100, $100. And now it's starting to accumulate because $80 went in there, then $80 went in there, then $80 went in there, right? So now it's starting to accumulate. But not only is it accumulating, but the beautiful thing about this particular policy, out of all the other policies, is that you see the word index. The index is actually referring to an indice, and that's the indice in the stock market, right? So in the stock market, you have many different types of indices. You have the NASDAQ, the Dow Jones. You even have the S&P 500, right? And so let's just say we're working with the S&P 500, right? The S&P 500 is tracking the top 500 companies in this country, right? And so those companies are your Amazon and your Facebook and your IBM and your Google, okay? And so we know that those companies are doing fairly well. So the S&P 500 averages about 8 to 10% annually, okay? So now that we know that we are going to get around 8 to 10%, right? What's happening is the insurance carrier, they're not going to take the risk of actually investing your money into the stock market, right? So what they're going to do is they're going to mirror the market. So they are going to mirror a specific index. Let's just say it's the S&P 500. So if the S&P 500 does 9%, what they're doing is they're going to match that 9% and give you 9% return on your cash value. So that $80, $80, $80, right, is actually going to receive 9% return. And then it's going to start compounding. So it's accumulating plus compounding, earning compound interest, which means that your money is going to be growing. Your money is going to be parked in a place where it's making more money, right? Which is exactly what we want to do. You want your money to be in a place where it's getting pregnant, where it's going out, working hard, and it's bringing back friends. Every single dollar goes out and it brings back 9 cents, right? 10 cents, 25 cents, right? That is what you want. And that is what you will get with an index universal life insurance policy, right? And so for me, I have 5 policies. Why? Because I have 5 people in my trust, right? So the trust is going to be the owner of the policy. The trust is going to pay the premiums every single month, and the trust is going to be the beneficiary of the policy, so that if anything happens to you, then what's going to happen is that death benefit is going to go to the trust, right? Which is super powerful. Okay. So this is the type, this is just one of the many assets that you want to place inside of your trust. Okay. So now that's how it connects with your trust. Now, the next thing that I want you to know is about real estate, right? Because I absolutely love real estate. Okay. So when it comes to real estate, that's my favorite thing in the world. I have been a real estate investor for 11 years. Okay. And what I want you to know is that with real estate, your trust can actually own real estate. Your trust can own property, right? Your trust can get a mortgage. Your trust can get a home equity line of credit, right? So I need you to know that, right? Because you want to put yourself in a position to where your trust is sustaining itself. You want to put yourself in a position to where you don't have to pour in your W-2 money, right? That is not what you want, right? The trust needs to be able to eventually replace your income, right? And so you can do that by way of real estate. That's how I did it, right? And so it's extremely powerful. So let me give you a quick strategy that you can use, right? So let's just say that we set up our business trust, right? And so our business trust is going out looking for real estate, and now it qualifies for a mortgage, right? And so the type of mortgage that we're going to get, we're going to go ahead and buy a multifamily, okay? So the type of mortgage that we're going to get is a DSCR, right? Debt service coverage ratio loan. That is for entities that are going to buy income producing assets that are not owner occupied. Okay. And so let's just say with this DSCR loan, right, they're going to fund us, and they're going to give us up to 80% of the purchase price, right? So now that we know that we qualify for 80%, we need to go ahead and get the other 20%, right? Because at the end of the day, right? We don't want to be able to use our own money. And so that's what I need you to know. You always need to be in a position to where you're using OPM, you using the bank's money, you using other people's money. You're not using your own money, okay? So what we're going to do is remember, if you rewind and we were talking about building credit, right? What happened is we decided to establish business credit. And so we're getting credit cards and lines of credit. So let's just say that you got a business credit card for $50,000, right? The first thing that you're going to do, right? You're going to use that for a down payment for real estate. But before you use it as a down payment for real estate, the first thing that you're going to do is you're going to liquidate that credit card. So now the cash is going to go straight into your bank account. And before you go to the closing table with that cash, you're going to funnel that money into your index universal life insurance policy. Why? Because you're paying yourself first, okay? So whatever large lump sums of money that you have, right? You're always going to put yourself in a position to where you're paying yourself first. So now that money goes straight into your IUL policy, okay? And so now that it's going into your IUL policy, what's going to happen is your cash value is going to go up by $50,000, right? And so now that your cash value is going to go up by $50,000, what needs to happen next? Right? Well, you have to understand that you are going to be earning compound interest off of that $50,000 that's sitting inside of your cash value. So let's just say it's going to earn 9%. So that 50,000 is now going to be working for you, earning money for you, right? You have to put your money in a position to where it's going to work for you. All right. You do not want to work for money. Okay. And I'll touch on that in just a moment, but you do not want to work for money. Okay. So what's going to happen is that 50,000 is now going to be earning compound interest, but you need that 50,000 as a down payment. So what you're going to do is you're going to contact the carrier, tell them that you need a loan, right? And you have to understand that the carrier sees your cash value as collateral. And so they're going to lend you the money that you need. They're going to lend you probably $49,000, right? They're not going to lend you the whole 50, but they'll lend you $49,000, right? They're going to lend you the 49,000, but it's going to be from their own bank account, from their reserves. They're not going to touch your 50,000 that's sitting inside of your cash value. So your 50,000 is going to stay inside of the IUL earning 9%. They're going to cut you a check for 49,000. It's going to go straight direct deposit into your bank account. That's going to be the life insurance carrier's money. So now the 49,000 is sitting inside of your bank account. Now you're going to deploy it to real estate. So now you go straight to the closing table. So you have the DSCR loan that covered the 80%, and then you have the 49,000 that you use as a down payment. Now you just closed on a piece of real estate. Let's just say you bought a triplex. You just closed on 3 doors, right? And you use zero of your own money. You got 100% financing and you use $0 down, right? And now you have 3 doors. So let's just say each door is giving you $2,000 in rent and it's the first of the month, right? So that's 246, that's $6,000. So now you just collected $6,000 in cash flow and rental income. What is the first thing that you're going to do with that rental income? I need to hear it. You guys need to tell me.
Pay on the money that you borrowed.
Yes.
Specifically that
So
credit card.
yeah, so you're definitely going to pay the money back, but that's not the first thing that you're going to do. That's probably the second thing that you're going to do. What's the first thing that you're going to do?
Don't
I'm
pay
going to
you.
wait.
Reinvest?
Deposit the money in the cash value.
Thank you. Who's that? Yes. That's the first thing that you're going to do. You're going to pay yourself first. You're going to put that $6,000 straight into your cash value. That $6,000 is going to start earning compound interest, right? And then you're going to borrow it back out, right? Let's just say you borrow 5, right? So now you borrow 5 and then you what? You pay off, you not pay off, but you pay towards the credit card, you pay towards your mortgage, and whatever's left over, you put it inside of the trust fund account. right? That's what you're going to do. And you're going to do month in, month out, month in and month out. And then you're going to rinse and repeat, and you're going to do it again. Property number 2, property number 3, property number 4. So this is how you're able to accumulate assets for the trust. This is how you're able to leverage credit and leverage OPM. And this is how you're able to build generational wealth that actually lasts generations. Okay, so remember I said that you do not have to work for money, right? Money has to work for you. This is the exact formula that I use in order to retire myself, right? So I haven't worked as a nurse. I retired myself at 31 years old, right? So I gave myself a deadline. Remember, in the beginning of the call, I told you I was a registered nurse. I was living paycheck to paycheck. When I say paycheck to paycheck, I am dead serious. Okay, I would get paid on Friday and I would have to go get a cash advance because I didn't have enough money. And every other week, I would be getting cash advances because it was just never enough. I couldn't catch up. Right? That's the situation that I was in until I decided to invest in real estate, until I decided to set up a trust, until I decided to start accumulating assets, until I decided to start leveraging credit, until I decided to start getting 100% financing on real estate, until I decided to start leveraging OPM, right? Until I decided to get my IUL policies and start paying myself first, right? But I had to make the decision. So I remember the day. I remember the day that I decided I am not going to be in this career for long, right? So one day, I will tell you this quickly. One day, I was at work and I had a coworker, her name was Audrey, right? And one day at work, Miss Audrey, she wasn't feeling well. She was older, she was 65 years old, and she was tired. And I'm young. I don't even know how old I was. Maybe I was 23, 24. I don't know. I'm like ripping and running through the halls and I'm taking care of my patients and I'm also taking care of her patients because she couldn't do it. So I looked at her and I said, Miss Audrey, when are you going to retire? You're 65 years old. Like you made it. You've been a nurse for 40 years, right? And this is what society has programmed us to thinking, that we need to work for 40 hours a week. We need to work for 40 years and we need to retire when we're 65, right? And so she was the epitome of that, right? So I said, you're 65 years old. You've been a nurse for 40 years. When are you going to retire? She says to me, Christina, I'm not ready to retire. And I'm like, you're not ready to retire. You look like you're ready to retire. And she's like, no, I'm going to wait until I'm 67 and a half. And I said, why? And she's like, because if I wait until I'm 67 and a half, Social Security is going to give me an extra $300. And I looked at her and I said, Miss Audrey, I said, you are going to work for another 2.5 years for an extra $300? And she's like, yes. And I said, okay. I said, okay. And it was at that moment that I decided that I was not going to be Miss Audrey. I decided that I wasn't going to work in my career for 40 years. I decided that I was only going to give myself 10 years in order to accumulate the cash that I needed, because your job is your first business partner. So I needed that cash in order to throw into my second business, my first business, which is my real estate, right? So I needed that money. So I said, I'm only going to give myself 10 years, right? And I was able to retire myself in 8 years instead of 10 years. I didn't even have to do the 10. But I will tell you that that day, Miss Audrey, she was so exhausted that when she got into her car and she drove out of the parking lot, she hit the tree right in front of the emergency room and she died on impact. She never made it home. She never made it to 67 and a half. She never made it to retirement. That was the day that I said, I'm not going to depend on the government. I'm not going to work 40 years. I'm going to retire when I'm young. I retired myself at 31 years old. I travel the world. I have been to almost 30 different countries. I go to a different country every 6 weeks because I have location freedom, time freedom, financial freedom, because I made the decision that day. I'm not going to work for 40 years. I'm not going to depend on the government. I'm not going to depend on Social Security. I'm not going to work until I'm 65 years old. That's not going to be me. And so this is the formula that I used, and this is the formula that you can also use. So this is how you're going to transfer wealth. You're going to put yourself in a position to where you own nothing but control everything. And I'm going to say that again because it's so vitally important. Put yourself in a position to where you own nothing but control everything. That is stewardship. You have to be a good steward of the assets. You have to be a good steward of your wealth. You have to be a good steward of your legacy. Okay, versus ownership. So you have to understand that society has programmed us in a certain kind of way. Okay, and so it's going to take us to undo that programming or to unlearn those things. So society has taught us to where we need to be the proud owner of everything. You are the proud owner of the house. You are the proud owner of the car. You are the proud owner of the job, right? Everything is tied to your name and your social security, right? We have to get away from that way of doing things, right? So now with this house, right, you have to understand that if that house, right, if you didn't wake up tomorrow, that house is still going to be there, is it not? Somebody tell me, is that house still going to be there if you don't wake up tomorrow?
Yes.
Thank you. So if you know that the house is still going to be there, then it's not ownership of the house that you truly desire. What it is that you truly desire is you want control over the house while you're living. And you can have that control with a trust. That is what stewardship is going to give you. So the trust is going to own the house and you're going to control the house while you're living. And the trust is designed to outlive you. So now when you transition, whoever is going to control the house next takes over. Okay. So now how do you actually transfer the wealth? You're going to transfer the wealth through TCUs. TCU stands for Trust Certificate Units. They're just like stock certificates. So you know how stock certificates represents ownership in a company? Well, Trust Certificate Units represents beneficial interest in a trust. So what that means is that we want to go ahead and document how much we are going to be giving out, right, to our beneficiaries. So for example, your trust is going to have 100 trust certificates. And let's just say that I'm one of your beneficiaries and you're going to give me 25 units. That means that I have 25% of beneficial interest. So if the trust is worth $1 million, then that means that I'm going to have $250,000 worth of beneficial interest. Okay, so that is how you're going to transfer TCUs or transfer wealth through the TCUs, because now your children are going to receive TCUs, and then once they transition, their children are going to receive TCUs, and then once they transition, their children are going to receive the TCUs. So the units are going to pass down from generation to generation to generation. That is how wealth is transferred, right? Now, why do you think that we see sometimes we see athletes, famous families, celebrities, right, that they end up losing their whole entire wealth in their lifetime, or it doesn't even last the second generation, right? In a lot of wealthy families, the wealth is lost. 90% of the wealth is lost by the second to third generation. And the reason being is because they don't have a trust within their structure, right? Let's just be honest, right? How many athletes have you seen that their families are going into probate, right? The actors, the singers, right? So these individuals, they do not have trust within their structure, right? And they never even thought about preservation. And so that's what we need to do, right? So there are certain tools that you need to have in place if you want to preserve wealth. Those tools there's two tools. The first one is a trust. The second one is a life insurance policy, okay? So the trust, right? The trust is going to, you have to understand that the trust has insurance on everything. The trust has a car, so the trust has car insurance. The trust has a house, so the trust has homeowners insurance. The trust has business, so the trust has liability insurance, right? And so the trust has human assets, which are you, right? So the trust also needs to insure its human assets as well. Okay. And so that's why the trust is going to take out a policy on every human asset associated with the trust, meaning you, meaning the any co-trustees and the beneficiaries, right? And the future beneficiaries. Okay. So the trust is going to take out a policy on every single person, right? And the trust is going to be the owner of the policy. You are going to be the insured. The trust is going to pay the premiums every single month, and the trust is going to be the beneficiary. Why? Because if anything happens to you, the trust is devastated. The trust is experiencing a loss. The trust needs to be compensated for that loss, right? So if something happens to you and your death benefit is $5 million, the trust needs to get compensated. The trust needs that $5 million. That $5 million goes straight to the trust, right? So that's why it's important that the trust insure the trustees, the beneficiaries, and the future beneficiaries. Those future beneficiaries are called the trust fund babies. So when you hear the term trust fund baby, it's because a baby is born into the trust organization. Okay. And so what happens when you have a trust fund baby born into the trust organization? Well, what happens is the trustee, once that baby is 30 days old, the trustee is going to take out a policy on that baby. Okay, so the trustee is going to take out a life insurance policy on that baby. And now the trustee is going to be paying those premiums every single month. Remember, $100, right? $100 every single month on that IUL policy for that new trust fund baby. Okay, now remember that trust fund baby is going to grow up. So let's just say that trust fund baby grows up and now they're 18 years old. What happens when you're 18 years old, right? You need a car, you're going off to college. There's so much stuff that's happening. So let's just say that they want to get a new set of Hot Wheels because they're going, they're going on campus, right? And so they can normally go down to the dealership, pull their credit, get into a high interest car loan, paying $1,000 a month for a $30,000 car. That's easy. Or because they're a trust fund baby, they can come to the trust organization and they can request a loan. And so they say, hey, I need a $30,000 loan because I need to buy my first car. So the trustee's like, okay, no problem. Writes a check, hands it to them, $30,000. They go buy the car cash, boom, new set of Hot Wheels, and they're going driving on campus, right? And in order for that trust fund baby to have some level of responsibility, right? And accountability, they're still going to have to pay the trust, right? So they're going to pay the trust, let's just say $300 a month, right? And so now the trust fund baby is paying the trust $300 a month plus interest, right? And so let's just say that a year into the future, the trust fund baby's like, no, thanks. I don't want to pay the trust $300 a month anymore. And so they default, right? Well, that's fine because the trustee is never going to give the trust fund baby a loan anymore, right? They defaulted, but it's okay that they defaulted because the loan did not originate from the trust. The loan originated from the trust fund baby's life insurance policy. Why? Because the minute that that trust fund baby asked for a loan, the trustee contacted the carrier and requested a loan from their IUL policy. You have to remember that that IUL policy has been compounding, right? Earning compound interest plus accumulating cash value since that trust fund baby was 30 days old. So do you know how much money is in there? So they went and requested a loan for $30,000. The carrier did a direct deposit into the trust fund because the trust is the owner of the policy, right? And then the trustee just went and wrote a check to the beneficiary. So that loan doesn't need to be paid back. And the reason being is because that money is going to be automatically deducted from the death benefit. So whenever you take out a loan for your IUL policy, you do not have to pay it back, okay? So that loan is automatically forgiven because it's going to be taken from the death benefit. So once that trust fund baby transitions, right? And they have a $9 million death benefit. That $9 million is going where? It's going to the trust minus the $30,000, right? It's going straight into the trust. And now the trust is replenished with $9 million. That is how you're going to preserve wealth from generation to generation to generation, right? It's through that. You have to make sure that everyone is insured, right? That's preservation of wealth. You have to have the tools, okay? Let's continue on. So these are the books that I recommend. What Would the Rockefeller Do is a really good book teaching you about the marriage between trust and life insurance. The Art of Passing the Buck, Volume 1 and 2 teaches you about trusteeship. Family Wealth teaches you how to run your family like a business. And the Complete Book of Trust teaches you about the different types of trust. So now here is a quick video about a trustee that took action on the information that we provided tonight.
Well, again, Christina, it's been a wonderful experience. I've been looking at your videos on YouTube for a while. And, there are a number of people offering trust these days. And, I guess that's the big thing, don't own anything, control everything. That kind of, I didn't say it correctly, but that is the sentiment. And so it seems like the playing field is being leveled now from the rich and people who weren't privy to this information. So thank you for being such a great asset to a community that didn't have this information. And you made it so simple. Thank you for the recordings. Thank you for the step-by-step instructions. Things that we can go back and look at. So we do appreciate you. And thank you, Mondo. That was a great explanation of infinite banking. I know a number of people are talking about that, but they make it so complex. And his presentation was nice and succinct and very informative. So this has been an overall great experience. I definitely will recommend you to others.
So let's work together, you guys. You want to take action on the information that I provided you guys with tonight because it could be a new way of doing business, right? So you want to treat this like a big business, not like a small mom and pop shop. So we can work together. I do have a program where you can learn step by step how to implement this trust structure and how to get your affairs in order and how to build your legacy, right? Build it the right way. So you do have three options. The first option is do it yourself. So with do it yourself, we do have an online course where everything is pre-recorded and you're able to set up everything. So it comes with all three trusts that I mentioned earlier, which is the business trust, the family trust, and the tax-exempt nonprofit trust, right? And then it comes with 43 video modules. So what happens is you actually watch the video trainings where I record and step by step everything that's inside of the trust and how to actually set it up. And then you get to download the template and set up everything yourself, okay? So you get lifetime access to the course, so it's never going to expire. You get access to all the resources and ebooks. So all of the books that I just mentioned, some of those books, if you buy it yourself, is over $800, and you get electronic versions inside of the program. And then as far as the resources, we give you every single resource that you need in order to operate your trust efficiently and effectively, meaning that if you need to transfer your house, we give you the quick claim deeds. If you need to open up the bank accounts, we give you exactly what you need. If you need to transfer your vehicles, your titles, bill of sales, your businesses, your LLCs, we give you all of the paperwork and documentation that you need. If you need to have a board meeting, we show you exactly how to do it. If you need to file taxes, we show you step by step, right? So you get all of the resources. We also have a community. So our community is over 2,500 trustees, and we have a private Facebook community and a Telegram chat. So that means that you get to network with like-minded individuals. These are individuals who have been operating as trustees for years now, who has all of their assets, businesses inside of a trust. You get to chat with them back and forth. They're in your city, they're in your state, okay? So the do-it-yourself course is only $997. The second option is Done With You, where we get to do it together in a workshop style setting. So it's 5 live Zoom calls. It's Monday through Friday, from 11 in the morning to 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, okay? So on Monday, we're gonna set up the unincorporated business trust together. So I'm gonna show you step by step I'm going to break down every single paragraph of the trust so that you can understand the contents of the trust. When I tell you, you're not going to know how to operate the trust if you don't know what's inside of the trust. So I'm here to break down every single paragraph so that you understand what's inside of the trust, so you can operate it efficiently and effectively, so you can have the confidence to know that you can operate as a trustee, right? And that you can carry out everything that's inside of the trust, right? After that, I just go through Q&A so that I can answer any and all questions that you might have. Tuesday, we set up the family trust together. We dive into Q&A. Wednesday, we set up the nonprofit trust together, and then we dive into Q&A. So when it comes to the Q&A, because you're doing this in a group setting, people are asking really good questions that you didn't know you wanted to know. So you end up learning more by just being in that environment, right? On Thursday, we focus on OPM, other people's money. So what I do is I show you how to get those EIN numbers with the IRS. Then I show you how to have a board meeting so you can document how much you're going to fund the trust with. I show you how to open up your bank accounts. I give you a list of banks, and then our funding manager comes in and teaches you about business credit and business funding. Okay, so it's super important. We dive into Q&A. We teach you everything. And then Friday is the last day where we focus on asset protection and taxes. So we do an inventory of your assets, and then I show you how to transfer your house into the trust by way of a quitclaim deed, how to transfer your vehicles into the trust by way of a bill of sale, and how to transfer your businesses into the trust by way of purchase agreements and amendments through the Secretary of State. And then our CPA comes in and teaches you how to file taxes for the trust and answers all of your tax questions, okay? So this is done live, 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And our next workshop is going to be, I think it's June 8th through the 12th, okay? So we only do it once a month, but you do get lifetime access, and our workshops are recorded. So you get the recordings from every single workshop that we've ever done and every single one that we're going to do in the future, but you get to attend live every single workshop, right? So the one in June, July, August, September, October, you get to attend all of them because you have lifetime access to the workshops, okay? You still get access to the do-it-yourself course, and you just get that sense of security to know that we're going to hold you accountable. We're going to hold your hand through the whole entire process. Okay, so the workshops are only $2,500. And then the last option is done for you, where my team and I will be able to set up everything for you. So we'll establish all three of your trusts. We'll apply for your EINs. We'll transfer all of your assets like the house, the car, the businesses. You'll get individualized support. And then you get that sense of security to know that everything was done correctly. So the private done for you sessions are 7,500. So if you guys are interested, then you can go to our website, wealthytrustee.com. You can send us an email at info@7waystowealth. Visit us on social media, and then you can also send us a text or give us a call. So what I want to do is I want to show you what one of our sample trusts look like, and then what the program looks like, and then I'll dive into Q&A. So let's see here. Okay, so this is just a sample of one of our trusts. So everything that you see in red is what you will be customizing for the trust. Okay, so these are all of the sections and provisions that I told you about. So I break down every single paragraph so that you guys can understand the contents of the trust. Okay, so this is the Wealthy Trustee program. This is what you're going to get with your purchase. So once you enroll, after you go through the induction, then you'll go through all of the training modules, okay? So the first set is trust entity, where you will learn what a trust is. You'll learn about the different parties, which is the grantors, trustees, beneficiaries, successors, protectors, the benefits and the different types. Then you'll learn how to set up the tax exempt trust, how to set up the family trust, and how to set up the business trust. Then you'll learn about tax strategies, like how to operate tax exempt, how to apply for sales tax exemption, distributable net income, how to avoid tax abuse and evasion. You want to go through asset protection. So you want to take an inventory of your assets, then learn how to create a bank account, a brokerage account, how to transfer your house, your cars, insurance policies, how to transfer your businesses and have meetings. And then you want to learn about wealth creation. So you'll learn how to establish business credit, how to invest in the stock market, and how to do infinite banking with the life insurance policies. You'll go into wealth preservation with the Legacy Crest, and then you'll have your resources in your ebooks. So if you guys are interested in enrolling, as I mentioned, you just go to wealthytrusty.com, okay? And for those of you guys that are on the call, you can enroll if you enroll in the next 24 hours, you can enjoy 20% off. So all you have to do at checkout is put the discount code TRUST20, and then we'll just slash off 20%. So without further ado, I want to open up the floor for Q&A. Does anyone have any questions based off of what I went over in the webinar?
I have a
So,
question.
hi.
Hi, this was a great presentation, by the way. Thank you for the information.
Thank you. I appreciate you for being here this evening.
Yes, right up my alley. I own an insurance agency in California, and it's just the best kept secret.
Oh, beautiful.
So does any of your options include the fees to the Secretary of State, transfer fees for real estate, or that's a separate fee that we would pay to those entities?
That's all separate.
All separate, okay. And if I did the second one and I'm not able to log on because I'm on Pacific Standard Time, would those Zooms be available the same day for me to watch it later, or would I need to wait for those pre-recorded videos to be available?
Yeah, they are available the same day.
Same day. Okay. I think that's it. Oh, and one other question. When you mentioned about the credit card, are we assuming that the credit cards are 0% interest to give you time to pay it back without having to be hit with high interest rates? When you
Yes,
mentioned
that's a good assumption. And our fund manager, he's going to teach you all about that. So he goes step by step. And he will go as far as setting everything up for you.
Perfect. All right. Thank you for your help. I appreciate
You're
it.
welcome. You're welcome. All right. Any other questions?
I have a
Hi.
question.
Yes, go for it.
Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, one of my question is that um, I've always heard that your residential home has to be in a revocable trust. If not, it's gonna be the bank can come after the balance due. And I'm just I mean, this is fairly new to me, this information. Can you verify that they're not gonna come after me if I do place my residential home in irrevocable trust that doesn't have my name? That's kind of a big question in my mind. Thank you.
Yes. Yeah, that's a good question. So what you are describing is the due on sale clause, and the due
Mhm.
on sale clause is an acceleration clause in majority of the mortgages. So the due on sale clause is only applicable if you decide to transfer your property to another person or to an entity that's not a trust. Right now, it can be an irrevocable trust, but they prefer to be revocable. The reason why is because, remember, I told you your asset is not protected with a revocable trust.
Mhm.
So it is the bank's best interest for your house to be in a revocable versus irrevocable. If it's in an irrevocable, they're not going to they're not going to move forward with the acceleration clause as long as you let them know that you are the trustee. Okay.
Okay. And then the other question is, if it is irrevocable trust, does it still need to file? I thought it was a private and it doesn't need to file taxes.
So if it generates income and it's generating the US dollar, it has to file
Mm-hmm.
tax. If it's generating income
Okay.
and it's generating the US dollar, it has to file a 1041.
Okay. I have a situation. It's like basically we have this family organization, and we don't do much right now, but we did like document our history background, ancestry information and things like that. And we raised money within our family. We published a book on our family and things like that. And I've always wanted to do more with the organization. And would it be like better for me to set up like a irrevocable trust to operate under a trust, or
So how are you operating the like what is the organization for?
it is we might be raising funds to do project back home in my country, in Africa. And we just want to, yeah, do something for our country, or somebody in our family who needs help, just providing that kind of support.
You can do it under a trust entity if you would like.
Okay. Would that be like the best option?
It's hard for me to
Or,
answer that. It's hard for me to
okay.
answer that question, yeah.
Okay. And then the last question, sorry. So the one that is the do it yourself, is that the 997?
That's correct.
Okay. Okay. And that's the one you showed us. It had like 40 something, 42, 43 modules.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Thank you so much.
You're
Thank
welcome, Miss Judy. Thank you for being here this
you.
evening.
Uh-huh.
All right, next we have Kayla. Hi,
Okay,
Kayla.
Christina. Hi, how are you?
I'm great. How are you doing?
I'm good. First, I want to say, like, I've been watching your videos for about 3 months now, and I do appreciate the opportunity that you give people to learn more without being charged. So I do appreciate that.
Oh, thank you
Um,
so much, sweetheart. I appreciate you saying that. Thank you.
no problem. So I have many questions, but I'll just ask one and then take turns. But
Okay.
as far as a trust and a business trust and a family trust, are they both taxed at 37%?
Yeah, so it's a tax bracket and the bracket is between 10 to 37.
Mm,
So it depends on the income that the entity generates, but both the business and the family are they are taxed entities.
okay, and segueing off of that, are there any ways to avoid those taxes like dividends or management fees?
Yes, absolutely. There's a lot of write-offs. So that's why I say you want to spend the money first. So there's a lot of expenses, a lot of write-offs. So if you want to take a look at what those are, just Google the 1041, and you'll be
Okay,
able to see the form and you'll see everything that you can write off for those taxes. I mean, for those
okay,
entities.
okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Next we have Jeanette.
Hi, Christina.
Hi, Jeanette. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. So since the grantor is going to be creating the trust, um, and they're going to have to be the one applying for the EIN. Um, if for some reason the grantor has some situation where they are came after personally, is that going to affect the EINs that they've applied for, or the entities that are attached to those EINs?
No, it doesn't. It's separate.
Okay, that was it. Thank you.
You're welcome. There's another question in the chat. It says, so is a holding company an LLC or is also a trust? So a holding company can be either an LLC. So the trust is a trust, but you can operate it as a holding company. So a holding company is all in the way that you operate it, but it can be any type of entity. It could be a LLC, a corporation, or a trust. Can we place a residential home into a trust if it's not paid off? Yes, you can. Can we operate from a trust for paying the mortgages and personal expenses? Yeah, that's going to be from the family trust. So any personal expenses that's family related. So that's mortgage, rent, utilities, things of that nature. So for the paycheck, if it can go straight into the IUL, that's if you would like your paycheck to go straight into the IUL. The example that I gave earlier was rental income. The next question is, will the family trust, Will this be the family trust or the business trust? So if it's for the real estate, then it would be the business trust. What's the interest rate for the IUL loan? That's a great question. It depends on the carrier. So it can be 2%, 3%, 4%. It depends on the carrier. Every carrier has a different interest rate loan. So you would contact your carrier. How do I get the recording? So we are live on YouTube. So you can go to our YouTube and you'll be able to watch this entire recording. So we'll put the YouTube link inside of the chat. And how much is for the trust only? We don't just sell the trust, so we want to teach you how to operate the trust, okay? So the next question is, how about the property that I'm renting? Can you switch it to the trust? Absolutely. So if you have a property that is an income producing property where you are receiving rent, then you can deed that property over into a business trust. What happens to the 50K? The 50K stays inside of your cash value. And then the rental income is going to cover the credit card that you liquidated. Thank you so much for sharing this gift, Christina. You're so welcome. Missed the first part. Was it recorded? Yeah, we put the recording in there. And if we set up all three trusts today, could they be used for years previous? No. So if you set it up today, then taxes are going to be due April 15th of 2027. If I am keeping all the funds in the family trust, do I still need to give out CTS? So you do want to list beneficiaries on there. You don't want to have a trust without beneficiaries. Are the family, oh no, are you familiar with the 508? So the tax exempt nonprofit trust is designated as a 508. So I meant where I'm paying rent. So if you don't own the property, you cannot deed the property into the trust. But if you do have a lease, then you can have the lease in the name of the trust. So if you are paying rent at a particular location, then you're going to want to change the lease, the rental agreement, into the trust, and then the trust will be able to cover that rental agreement. Can the business trust do gifting to the family trust? Yes. All right, Kayla has a question.
Okay, so like I said, I've been doing my research. So I've been doing a lot of research on the Rockefeller waterfall method. So my plan is to own the family trust, have that family trust own the business trust, and have that business trust own a C corporation. Now, I understand that C corporations get taxed twice at about 21%, one coming in and one going out. So I was looking into the S corporation, but I've been getting mixed answers looking on the internet as far as a trust being able to own the S corporation.
That's a great question. A trust cannot own an S corporation.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Also, I wanted to attach a foundation to my family trust. I live in Philly, and I don't know if you know about it, but it's a lot of stuff going on. Last year I did I could give back Thanksgiving dinner, within the community, and it did cost a lot of money, and I wanted to eventually get funding from the city. So I was setting up a foundation, so I'm able to get the 501(c)(3) tax exemption. But as far as taxes and as far as um, funding, would it be better if I set up a tax exempt trust rather than a foundation?
So that's a really good question. I think both entities are good. They don't operate the same way though. So like a private family foundation, you do have whatever comes in, you have to give back 5%. With a 508, you don't. With foundation, you do have to go through the 501(c)(3) route, and with the 508, you do not. You're automatically exempt federally. So there's different ways that both of them have to be compliant, and there is a difference between the two.
Okay, thank you. And last question. Um, I know once I set up the trust, I don't have that many assets to put in there, and I'm not really focused on a trust. It's more so the corporation and the foundation. So when I start off to create the trust, would you say ChatGPT is a good route? Or should I just start off and do everything like the correct way?
So you need to have, so my question to you is, do you want a soft foundation for the house that you're building, or do you want a solid foundation and a hard foundation for the house that you're building?
A solid foundation.
Okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, that's the answer. Thank you so
You're
much. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate you too, Kayla. All right, thank you guys. So we are all done with the webinar for this evening. I just want to say take action on the information that I shared with you tonight because it will change your entire life and it will change the trajectory of your kids and your family. And you want to be able to be that generational curse breaker in your family because I know that that's who you are. A lot of us were stuck in the middle here where we have to get our affairs in order, not only for our parents, but then we also have to do it for our children. And so that's the position that you're in right now, but it takes that one person in an entire lineage and an entire bloodline to take the leap of faith, to do it, to look fear in the face and say, I'm still going to do it, to actually establish the legacy so future generations can say, thank you for everything that you've done. So, I know it's a sacrifice and I know that it's a mindset shift, but once again, just do your research, do your due diligence because a trust is one of the most powerful entities in the entire world. Okay. It's not just only here in America, it's in the entire world. Okay. So thank you so much for being here. You guys have a good night. And if you have any questions or any, comments or anything like that, you can text back the phone number. You can send us an email. You can go to our website and you can also visit us on social media and also go ahead and subscribe to our YouTube channel.